Okay, we're recording. Erika is our first speaker. She's a permaculturist, life coach, IT and financial management consultant, founder of Food Grows Initiative and Somerset West Can, plus 2 more initiatives. So welcome, Erika. That's quite a diverse bio that you've got there. I'm just gonna share my screen quickly so that we can see your logo. Bear with me. Okay, Erika, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and welcome everybody. I'm not going to call myself an expert by any means, but what I can share with you is what I have learned in the last year, where we've actually managed to get some traction. First and foremost, never underestimate the power of your influence. You can influence everybody around you. And the number one learning I found is get a voice in the meetings. Get your counselor into your can. Have them join your various meetings. Nowadays with Zoom and MS Teams, we've got access like never before. Places that you couldn't physically get to, you can now get to via Zoom. Get involved with your council meetings. Go and attend them. They're happening on MS Teams or Zoom now. Get involved with the agroecology networks. We've got some really good scientists in South Africa with really good stuff. And I know in the Joburg side, the agroecology network's really strong. And the most important one of the meetings that I can think of that you should be joining right now is join the hotspot meetings, the team hotspot meetings. So the hotspot teams in each area consists of civic society, NPOs, and every single government department that works in that area. And this is where you're going to get your first-hand information and be able to make your best suggestions. When I say have a voice in the meetings, please make sure that you propose solutions. Don't just complain or beg. The second big thing is continue with your food freedom path. And when you're showing results, the councillors will pop their heads over the hedges. Politicians hate to be irrelevant. So if you encourage independence and make the politicians as irrelevant as far as possible, even those that were not interested in joining your can will come and pop their head over the fence when you're being successful. Close the loops, support regenerative agriculture, save your seeds, and try and create a circular economy wherever you go. This is your micro leverage. On a more macro level, and the third big learning is try and create coalitions of your main food role players and include everybody. Don't exclude anybody. The Food Aid Forum that started in March last year was largely looking at food aid until the food growers joined in and started going, but hey, hang on a minute, this is not sustainable. We need to start looking at food freedom. We've got to start growing our own food. And the Food Aid Forum consisted of provincial players, local metro players, retailers, big NPOs, cans, and academics. Academics, don't forget about them. They're really great in helping you come up with new policy and give you proof behind whatever you're trying to do. Try and make sure that you include all the different departments that keep pointing fingers at one another. So in a coalition, if you're dealing with one particular department in your local government and they say, no, this is another department that's responsible, which is usually what happens, then include them in the meeting. Then everybody's at the table. And nobody points fingers at one another anymore when you're all sitting at the same table. It's taken about a year, but eventually the Food Aid Forum is now focused on creating policy task teams for like a rapid response to be able to affect changes in policy. The fourth big learning that I found was that government does not like to deal with people. So they don't have any real way of dealing with the cans, for example, because we're this unknown entity. We consist of people. We don't have a leader. We've got many voices. We call them out on their spin. We like to put all the facts on the table and let people make up their own minds. And that's one of the big things that needs to be pushed to be changed, is that the government needs to deal with people, not with corporations and not with NPOs. And then the last big learning is a mindset of abundance. There's so many of us in this space, and there is actually space for all of us. The biggest downfall of civic society is the fact that we're competing with each other. We need to stop competing with each other and start playing the ball and not the person. And the ball here is changing policy so that everybody has food freedom. And there really is space for everybody here. I'll leave you with one last thing. Expect to have headwinds, expect to get resistance, and expect to have dirty political games. Expect to be attacked and discredited. And if you're on the right path, you're even going to get death threats and more. So the bigger the headwinds, the more you know you're on the right track. Keep going. Don't stop. That's me done. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much for that, Erika. That's excuse me, that's really inspiring. I love the sort of grabbing the bull by the horns type of sentiment that we got from that. And we're gonna go to Keith now, and please note your questions for Erika and Keith straight after Keith's presentation. But that's really a great call to action. So thank you for that, Erika. All right, Keith, I'm going to make you host so that you can share your screen. And when you're ready, we'll go over to you.
Thank you very much. Can everybody see the screen?
We can, but it's blank at the moment. Maybe there's a slight delay.
Is that any better?
We're still just seeing, I think it's your desktop. I think maybe stop share and try again.
Okay. Is that any better?
Yes, now we can see your presentation.
Okay, thanks very much. Okay, I'm going to be very brief. I'm just going to run through.
Sorry, Keith, when you start slideshow, we can't see your screen. Would you like me to maybe try and share on my side? Because I have your presentation. Okay. All right. Okay, we'll just, while that's opening on my side, we'll just give it a minute or two. Okay, can everyone see the screen?
Yep.
Okay, great. I'm gonna go into presentation mode. Okay, take it away, Keith.
Thanks very much. Can we move down to the next screen, please? Thanks. I think that a lot of the CAN movement's work has been primarily prioritised around the supply of food and associated materials to the most vulnerable houses in our community. With COVID-19 and the challenges our people face, this work will likely continue. However, as previously been said, there may be areas where we can contribute to more effective support from government in the area of food security. Next screen. Each year, local government is required to revise what is known as the Council's Integrated Development Plan. This year is more important as there is a requirement to develop the IDP for the next term of office. It's quite late in the annual participatory cycle, but it's not too late. Next screen. The question for the CAN movement is, what input should we be giving for inclusion in the next council's IDP? Ideally, this should be clearly defined targets for the relevant departments. So a good starting point is to get hold of the present IDP and the associated departmental plans and identify what is missing and what your CAN believes should be present. Next screen. Each CAN will have their own views on what should be included in their local council's IDP. However, it may be a good idea to discuss with other CANs and other interested parties within your local council's geographical area, so that there is a number of inputs on agreed priorities. Next screen. In the rest of this co-learning session, you might want to discuss the priorities that should be raised in the IDP process. The art of giving your recommendations an opportunity to be considered is to be concise, identify the relevant departments, and where possible, give clear qualitative and quantitative recommendations. The reason for that is that within the IDP and all of the plans, there are service level agreements and performance indicators. And what you're trying to do, having looked at the history, is to in fact shift them so that in fact they move more focused on the whole question of food security. Next screen, please. Without preempting discussions in this session and your own CAN's ideas of the inputs they want to make, some suggestions immediately come to mind for consideration. Next screen. First of all, household indigency policies and targets. This is basically the households that are identified as falling in indigency categories. And one of the challenges is that a lot of people get missed. The data that a lot of the councils hold is very poor. So really you need to look at the old IDPs and department targets and look at how that policy can be improved. And again, it's coming back to this point about not using it as a whinging session, but in fact clearly defining and trying to improve the performance of the local government. Another area you might want to consider is the use of council property for the production of food and associated educational projects. This can also be taken up at a provincial level for schools. We can look at the role of parks, clinics.
Alan has just requested
We can also look at the role of parks, clinics, recreation facilities, public space, for example. And I'm sure that you'll have many other ideas of where we can in fact utilize things. The critical thing, and it's coming back to what Erika said earlier, we shouldn't be looking at CANS owning the initiatives, but what we're looking at is how council can develop property in a way that it can be used for food production. Next screen, please. Disaster management is obviously a critical area, and I think that we saw in Gauteng with the challenge of the Boyson's informal settlement, that in many areas disaster management is underfunded to equip for major fires in informal settlements, for example. So questions about what resources do they have in storage? Are they equipped appropriately for major disaster management channels? And do they have the type of data on voluntary organisations to ensure that there's a cooperative response? The input is yours to make, but you may wish to work with community structures and also work on ward-based priorities. Next screen, please. Initially, it takes a little time to find and wade through local government IDPs, but each council legally should have the documents on a website. The approach can be replicated at a provincial level, and there are opportunities at a national level to work towards legislation on food wastage along the supply chain. As you're all aware, we have an incredible problem of food wastage within South Africa. A number of countries, including France, for example, have developed national policy which minimises and forces all of those companies along the supply chain to minimise food wastage and ensure that, in fact, that is made available to those in most in need. Next slide. There is no other slide. So thank you very much, everybody. I know that many of you may be aware of the information that's been put forward, but if you're interested, I can put a couple of pages together and get that circulated, and that may be of assistance. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Keith. For those who don't know, Keith is from Observatory Can in Joburg, and is also has extensive experience in community organizing and participatory democracy. Thank you so much for that lovely, simple presentation. And I think the idea today is to really keep it simple and hear from everyone. So now we'd like to take questions, and I already see a hand from Emily. Go ahead, Emily.
Thanks, guys. Very cool presentations, and thanks for the push on the first one to motivate us to work, maybe not harder, but smarter at least. I'm lucky in terms of our ward councillor is engaged with our CAN. Where I'm struggling with her at the moment is we currently need the regional director from the Department of Social Development to give us a letter in writing to continue using the facilities, the city building that we did last year to do our food parcel distribution from, and as a hub for our Build Back Better project, which has many ideas and plans to get people off the list of needing emergency food relief and into some kind of entrepreneurial path, etc., etc. So when I come up against a block that I've got at the moment where the councillor says she can't push the RD from DSD further than reminding her every couple of days to call us, even though in theory the RD supports our work because we take pressure off them. How does one go about, in this example, it's about the RD from DSD, but it could be another official in a week's time that we need a response from. How does one move past a councillor who says they can't push harder and try and contact X person ourselves? I'm wondering whether Salga can help us with that, because otherwise you're just sending anonymous, you're sending emails to the city email addresses. No one knows who you are, and you get stuck before you've gotten anywhere. Thanks.
Can I suggest that we take 3 questions and then Erika and I can respond? Is that acceptable?
Yes, perfect. So are there any other questions? Please feel free. I don't know if it's just me, but I struggle a little bit with the jargon, terms like RD.
Sorry, so I was talking in this instance, the Department of Social Development is the department responsible, I assume still, for providing emergency food relief under the lockdown conditions. So they obviously haven't been doing that well, or none of us would be needing to exist on one level. And the RD is the regional director. That's the person for Region E, I think. Senior person in social development who's responsible in this conversation for facilitating at a minimum food relief through other groups, but should still be providing food support.
Got it, thanks. Gary, I see your hand.
Yeah, morning everyone. Thanks for the continuous drive on trying to achieve our dreams here. As frustrating and challenging as it's been, I think just more a question towards Keith possibly, but have you established like a network map of existing food garden can groups that we can actually understand and see some of the best practice kind of ideas and things to just try and see how do we push together or we're not reinventing the wheel? So that's the first question. And then the second question is, again, with councillors and these guys, when it's not a priority for them, and we needing to find funding to support this as a more of an awareness perspective rather than an emergency response perspective, how do we go about that?
Thanks so much. I don't know if Keith, if you'd like to take those 2 questions, and Erika, you're very welcome to also take those questions. Do we have any others, or shall we tackle those?
Hi, this is Alice speaking from Veggie Garden. Thank you very much for the insights so far. I posted a question in the chat about the official processes for public participation in the IDP, shedding a little bit more light on that, because I think it's a great idea as CANs to contribute to those. But I'm not, I don't have a lot of understanding of those, so that it'd be good to know about them. Thanks.
Thank you, Alice. Before we go over to, I think, Erika, I don't know if you also want to answer these questions. I think it'll be nice to get your perspective as well. But Toko from Cape Town Together has also shared some resources with us, and we'll be very happy to share that with everyone as well. So, so just to let you know. Okay.
Thanks very much. Just in terms of the first question from Emily, in terms of the resources, for example, in the City of Johannesburg, and I can only use that example, and I know that you're in Region E, the control of properties actually falls under two levels. The first one, as you've correctly identified, is social development, and that is decentralized. If you've got a blockage with the regional director, can I suggest that you communicate directly with the MMC? But also in terms of the integrated development plan, I think that one of the areas which I missed in my presentation is the effective utilization, the use of properties that fall under the City of Johannesburg. And I think that's general for food distribution. The MMC, I can give you the MMC's direct contact details. So you're building it into the participation for the integrated development plan, that there's availability of facilities. The other area is also with what's known as the property company, which is a wholly owned, municipal owned entity of the City of Johannesburg. And it may well be to put recommendations into the integrated development plan for the utilisation of their properties for some of the things that you want to achieve. Because they control things like a lot of the recreational facilities, for example, the bowling greens and that sort of thing. So that they've normally got facilities that could be utilised. The other area is to petition. So as well as communicating with the MMC, you can also raise a petition, and that falls under the Office of the Speaker in the City of Johannesburg. Excuse me, and the contact is Peter Klute. I can give you details of that. So you just simply send in a petition. It doesn't have to be a mass petition. So you're working on three levels: direct contact with the MMC to, in fact, ensure that the regional director responds appropriately to the requirements that you expect and has historically had from social development. Including stuff in the integrated development plan for the utilisation of council property, not just as the CAN movement, but as a general principle. And then finally, a fallback is the petition system. In terms of Gary's question about mapping, we do have in Joburg, and Erika mentioned it, a Gauteng Together for Food Growers Forum, which is very, very active. But I have to be honest that we haven't done any mapping, and that would need to be coordinated, and we'd need to have to look at some resources. I think in many ways, Cape Town may be slightly more advanced than us on the whole question of food mapping. In terms of the final question around the public process, as community organisations, we tend to respond in an ad hoc way to local government. And one of the arguments that has been put forward is that we need to be far more proactive. Each year, before the new financial year, the city is legally required to have a public participation process that informs their planning. And as I said in my presentation, it's far more important in this year because it's not just a revision of the integrated development plan and all of the plans of the departments and the municipal owned entities. It's also that the council is legally required to produce a 5-year plan for the next term of office. The public participation process should start as early as August in the previous year. Obviously, COVID has disrupted this somewhat, but what tends to happen is that the mayoral committees really start to consolidate their IDP planning around January. And it's quite difficult to start to move them at quite a late stage. But because of the delays, a lot of councils are only really getting up to speed with public participation now. So we just need to have in our minds that for the next few years, you really need to start identifying who is accepting recommendations and proposals to be considered as early as August, and just really keeping on track and following up to see if in fact there's been response. The important thing with any of this public participation process, as I said, is just to be concise. So for example, in terms of the performance criteria for all of the departments, you really want to, in fact, clearly state which the department is, which is sometimes quite difficult and needs a little review of previous IDPs and department plans, which should, and not always, be on the council's website because it is a legal requirement. And secondly, who are the contact people that can most effectively be contacted to ensure that you give your input? So you're stating the departments and you're stating what you would like to happen, and also the performance criteria for that. I don't know if that helps at all. Okay. There's a query, who do we submit our proposals to? It obviously depends on your local council, and in some areas it falls under the Speaker's office. In other areas it falls under a planning department, normally in the city manager's office. You just have to ask who should receive IDP proposals. And as Erika previously said, it's very, very useful to communicate as well with your local councillor and ensure the councillor participates. It's a good idea also to consider ward-based planning as well, but that's quite technical, and I think that's a discussion for a further day. I don't know if the three questioners are covered, but I hope that I've given some indication that may be of some use. Thank you.
Thanks, Keith.
Thanks, Keith. Erika, I see you've been giving some input in the chat. Thank you so much for that. I don't know if you also want to respond to some of these questions.
I thought it would be a very good thing for, I see a lot of questions coming up in the chat saying you don't seem to know of hotspot meetings up in the Joburg side. I don't know about that. I do know that in the Western Cape there are hotspot teams created with all the different departments of local and provincial government. So if you don't have anything like that in Joburg, maybe that's a question to ask and to say, hey, it's working really well in the Western Cape. Why don't we do the same thing here? I'm finding it really, really useful at the moment because all the different departments are in the same meeting. Very useful.
Wow.
And the
Yeah.
other thing is public participation. Please remember that if you're going to be doing public participation and creating petitions, that if you send in a petition with 100,000 people signing it, it's still only seen as one objection or one input. Which is why the Dear South Africa platform worked really well, because we could, each of us put in an objection, and it would go through individually to the government. So please just keep that in mind as well when you're wanting to petition anything. Even if you take a petition and change one sentence and each person signs a different version, that still then has to be taken in as different objections. I think other questions are answered in the chat.
Great. So I see that you shared a website here, goodfoodnetwork.coza, and it seems like it seems like one can register your organic farm there. Is that for small food gardens as well?
It's for everybody that has anything to do with food. It's a free directory. I don't run it, so this is not my thing. It's one of the more ethical ones that I've found. And if you're a food grower, they will help you with setting up crowdfunding through Back a Buddy, and they will also help you set up a shop, because eventually everybody's going to want to do some business, and they will set your shop up for free, where you have access to normal banking and EFT and the whole works, and you only pay for transactions, not a monthly fixed fee or anything like that.
Thank you, Erika. That's wonderful. We have a question from Monday. Would love for Erika to elaborate on this hotspot meeting concept. I think those of us in Gauteng would love to hear more about that.
Okay, this was an initiative that was started by City of Cape Town as a response to the CAN networks, basically, raising the issues that none of the aid was reaching the ground where it was meant to be. And they have pulled in, so for example, if I look at my area is Eastern, which consists of Helderberg and Khayelitsha and Macassar. And they pulled in the top doctors from the main hospitals. They pulled in the main people from DSD, Department of Education, Department of Agriculture, the ward councillors, quite a few more. I can't even remember them off the top of my head. But these have then formed teams that we meet weekly. In the Eastern area, all we have is meetings. Other areas actually do more and hire people to go around and help people fill in application forms, and help them apply for land leases and things like that. So you can take it quite far. But I found just by having these meetings and being in these meetings with all these departments in the same meeting, and we're all worried about the same thing, and that's trying to save lives, that the usual finger pointing and passing the buck stops, and people are more willing to, because you're raising the issue out into the open in these meetings. I'll give you an example. I tried for 7 months to try and get help for some of the children for abuse, and I just got doors slammed in my face from private organizations and from DSD. But when I raised it in the hotspot meeting, within 3 days, my ladies are now going for training to do early identification and be able to pass proper cases on to the various case workers, and we've got connection with the right people.
Wow, that's brilliant. And can I ask, are these meetings in person or are they Zoom meetings?
Zoom meetings, everything over, well, MS Teams when we're talking about. government.
Right. Teams, Zoom, Google Meets, whatever works. Wow, that sounds like something we should try and implement here. And I don't know if anyone else has any questions, but I don't know if maybe as can admins and food growers and active members of society, maybe we should put together some policy, and maybe Keith, if you could maybe walk us through how to submit that policy to our local government on the Gauteng side, and maybe there's someone who can do that in Cape Town as well. And I see Mondes on the call, who is also very experienced in engaging with government. So I don't know if maybe that would be a possibility, that we formulate something together as a network. And maybe we can do that on Google Docs, or on use WhatsApp. I don't know how others feel about that. Is there anyone in the call who would like to raise an issue that they think government needs to address, for instance, land, or making land available for food, maybe things like food cooperatives, any ideas like that that anyone wants to share? Everyone is feeling a little bit shy today, I think. Great. If there are no more questions, I don't know if Keith and Erika, maybe you'd like to have a closing statement, but I really think that it would be useful for us to have more discussion in our groups about what we want from government and what we think government needs to bring to the party, so that we can press for those things. Great. I don't know if Keith, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks very much. I hope this has been useful, but I don't think it should be the end of the process. There's been a number of very positive points raised, and it may well be that perhaps we should continue this discussion after people have had an opportunity to reflect on the discussion that we've had at the moment. That doesn't have to be at this type of process, but perhaps seeing as we have everybody here, or we could open up the discussion a little bit wider. I just think that there was a couple of questions in terms of how we develop our proposals, and the question about who takes charge of them. Is it the municipalities? All municipalities are legally required to have a participatory process. Some of them think it should be consultation, i.e. we listen, we hear you, but we're actually going to put the proposal, we're going to ignore your proposals, which is always problematic. But obviously it's the weight of the requests that are being put forward, and actually effectively utilising your political contacts to ensure that there's a shift in that attitude of consultation and not participatory democracy. But I think that whilst we should all participate in the municipal's own processes with all of its limitations, I think that it's also important that, again, with the cooperation of ward councillors, if they're any good, is to develop your own proposals and put those in both within the municipal process, but also separately, just as a reinforcement. And as I mentioned earlier, we can put forward ward-based proposals. We can put forward township proposals for specific townships. And very often that'll be a lot wider than the focus of the discussion today. It can be a whole question around infrastructure, for example, or capital programs that are required within your area. Okay, I think I'll end it there. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Keith. I just remembered something very random, but I was having a conversation with Toko about this issue, and she also mentioned that because she was in budget planning before, that a lot of the things that one wants to achieve can be done through pressing for a budget for that particular thing. So that's also maybe something we can ask her to elaborate on in another session. Erika, do you have any closing thoughts for us?
Don't wait on government. Keep going. Keep going with the independence and the self-emancipation. And I can promise you that the government will then come to you and ask you what you need instead of you asking them. And although it's good to fit in with all their processes and everything, like Keith has said, right now we're in a pandemic and we're not coming out of it anytime soon. So things can be reshuffled at any time.
Thank you so much for that, Erika. I think I love that attitude of doing things for ourselves first, and then government will come to us. I really appreciate that. If there's anyone who is in Gauteng who would like to be part of a process where we consult with government, I'm going to leave my phone number in the chat. And if you're not already in the Gauteng Food Growers group or the CAN admin group, please try to get hold of me. I think in terms of Cape Town, hopefully you'll know who to get hold of. I don't know if you know Toko or Marika, but you can also send me a WhatsApp if you're in Cape Town, and I can put you in touch with someone in Cape Town, or we can find out afterwards. So thank you so much, everyone, for being part of this. And yeah, we really hope that we'll see lots more engagement with local government, and that we'll start seeing, a gradual shift towards food sovereignty, food independence, and a much healthier South Africa.
Julie?
Yes.
Sorry, you're wrapping up so beautifully, and now I've had a thought.
No, please go ahead.
I wonder what the group's thoughts are around, so I'll just use my example, and maybe it's relevant to others. So this facility that we distributed our food from last year, that is co-run by the Johannesburg Property Company, and I need authorization as well from the Department of Social Development. Now, we're waiting for an official letter from the regional director to say NOAA can distribute food from there. Meanwhile, the building is, nothing's happening at it. And the security guard there doesn't mind us doing anything with it, because he knows that people are hungry and these are unprecedented times. I mean, what would happen if we just started using it again to feed people? I mean, when we talk about, self-emancipation and leading, and government will have to follow and hopefully walk with us, what kind of recourse or trouble theoretically would we get into if we just say, fuck it, people need to eat, excuse my swearing, and we are just going to feed people, and stop us only if you are offering us an alternative, because we can't wait. Just wondering in terms of your thoughts around sort of guerrilla feeding, don't know.
Keith,
Thanks for
yeah,
that,
go ahead.
Emily. A lot of the property, Joburg Property Company facilities don't have leases, and that facility you refer to is actually quite unusual because it actually has security guards. Many of the facilities have just basically fallen into disrepair. And are squatted and that type of thing. In fact, we support a lot of people in squatted environments that are council or property company owned. I'd just go ahead, quite honestly, but I think that as well as going ahead as a separate issue, not saying that you go to the city and say we're going to use it anyway, just use it. You need to, in fact, escalate that past the regional director and talk to the executive director of social development, and as I said, the MMC. They normally are quite responsive, the MMCs, and interestingly enough, they're quite responsive to stuff on social media. For example, I find that a lot of the senior politicians are very responsive if you place it, saying you're disappointed by this department, rather than attacking the politicians. If in fact you use Twitter and copy the MMCs and also the executive mayor. So you tweet to the relevant department, social development, if you can find it. I haven't got it to hand at the moment. The City of Johannesburg, the MMC, and just say that in fact the work of this department is not reflecting well on council, for example. That normally gets a reasonable response, and the executive mayor very often picks up on things like that. Thank you.
Thanks, Keith. That's cool. Awesome. Yay. If I go to jail, bring me lots of Nando's, guys.
Just a little addition, Emily, and anybody that's listening. If you are using land to grow food and you don't have a lease for that land, and the municipality comes to remove you from the land, everybody just leave one person with a video camera, even your phone, and record the people and ask them and say, why are you destroying food in the middle of a pandemic? We're not living on this land. We're not doing anything but improving it. And it was a dump. And I can promise you, they will not destroy the plants. They will stop every time.
Oh, thanks for that advice, Erika. And we've actually seen video footage of red ants coming to try and destroy people's food gardens, and it's good advice to get that on video, because it's terrifying, and it should never happen. So yeah, I think we're all very much in favor of guerrilla gardening and breaking the rules. Yeah.
Because the building I'm talking about is an old bowling clubhouse. And I've wanted to turn the old greens into a veggie garden for about 6 months. And they're not badly overgrown, and it's very fertile soil and perfect. I suppose if I could get enough mad people to join us, it would be wonderful to turn that into a community veggie garden. But yeah, I would be scared, but maybe others aren't in our area who could go and dig up the first bit of bowling green. Erika, I wish you lived in Joburg.
There's plenty of brave people in Joburg.
I'll come and dig with you, Emily. Okay, everyone. Thank you so much. Please take note of my number if you want to get hold of me. If you want to be directed towards either Cape Town or Gauteng groups. And yeah, I think this conversation needs to continue in some way, shape, or form. And we'll be sharing whatever resources we can, leaflets explaining these processes, etc. And thanks for your participation, and we appreciate you as food growers and active members of society. And have a wonderful day.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Erika. Thanks, Keith. Thanks, Julie. Cheers,
Thanks,
guys.
everyone. Cheers.
Thank you. Bye.